Okay, well, in the words of Bill Hicks, let me plaster on a fake fucking smile and plow through this shit one more time. That's just, that's really what it is some days. It really is. I got to be honest with you. It's just plowing on a fake fucking smile and plowing through this shit one more time. That's really how it is for me some days. Today's kind of one of those days. The upside of that is that my research and work on this new film is just, it's fucking crazy nuts. That shit we read last night from Sitchin was just off the charts. This record, this tablet, Sumerian ancient tablet that's in a library in Oxford, England, it contains these lists of these Anunnaki gods. See, that's been the big question about the rock wall thing that until now I haven't been able to answer. Because we were looking at the dating of this, and we were looking at the blue shale deposits of the wall. And we're going, God damn, this thing's old. Most people, including myself, I think have been under the impression that the Anunnaki just got here 5,000 years ago. As we found out last night from this tablet located in Oxford, England, that's absolutely not true. These guys were here long, 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 long before that. And they may or may not have been the inhabitants of what is known as Atlantis. But what is clear is that 5 of these Anunnaki gods ruled over, or not 5 gods, but they were 5 kingdoms that was ruled over by a multitude of these Anunnaki gods for a grand total of something like 238,000 years before the Great Flood. And then after that, the remnant of that spread out throughout the world and reseeded and set themselves up as gods with the remaining surviving human populations. And then that's when they started, getting the freak on with them, and the rest is history. But this idea of, them coming to Mars first, and the texts talk about, one of their people died on Mars, and they etched his face into the inside of this mountain. Obviously, that's talking about the face on Mars, which is right next to some ziggurat-style pyramids. They look more like ziggurats than pyramids. Smack dab on the 33rd degree parallel on Cydonia on Mars. That area that became Sumir was in those times known as Cydonia, and it's also on the 33rd degree parallel. I believe the rock wall to be one of these 5 cities. Beyond any shadow of a doubt, I believe this. I believe the rock wall to be one of the 5 cities that was ruled over for this 238,000-year period before the flood. And I believe because of its location on the 33rd degree parallel, when they could have built this thing anywhere else, they also built it in like 3 feet of seawater where a sea was located there at the time. They found shark's teeth embedded in the outside of the rock wall, and John Lindsay found sand dollars at the bottom of it when they cracked open, still had fresh meat in them. And they fled along the 33rd degree parallel after the deluge and wound up in a direct line right across on the other side of the world at what became Sumir, and that's where Oannes came out of the water. And you got to remember, Oannes was this reincarnating of the same. It was basically whenever events would happen, these guys would flee to other parts of the world and set themselves up as gods, and they would take on new types and new forms throughout these different. That's why they were different incarnations. They would literally incarnate into different bodies, but it would be essentially the same essence, the same person. This is what the Emerald Tablets of Thoth are all about, ladies and gentlemen. You heard me read them here. That's what the whole thing is about. That's what the secret of the Freemasons is. Why do you think the number 33 is so important to the Freemasons? Why do you think it's important that this rock wall is built right here in Dallas, smack dab on the 33rd degree parallel where they killed Kennedy? Why do you think that's important? Why do you think it is that the East Fork Masonic Lodge that Congressman CMP member Ralph Hall is a member of has a little representation of the rock wall around the top of the sides of their website? A little animated thing. It's because these guys were the original builders. They existed on the earth 238,000 years ago or more. And for 238,000 years before the flood, rather. And that's why the evidence of these guys has been found so far back. That's why they found triangle plates with Phoenician letters and writing on them with skull and crossbones on them that rang with a frequency buried down where they were pulling out mastodon bones at that level in Dallas on Browder Springs, very close to where the Dallas Masonic Cathedral is now. I mean, literally like a few hundred yards. These guys were the ancient builders, the ancient Masons. This is where all this knowledge originally goes back to. That's why the rock wall stones are built with masonry. That's why they're buttered that way. Hell, Roswell is on the 33rd degree parallel. So what did they do? The deluge came. Some of them got wiped out. The ones that survived navigated the 33rd degree parallel around the earth, set up new cities with new slaves and workers and new people that they, basically worshiped them as gods, that they gave knowledge and civilization and everything to. And then as time progressed, when the Amorites were kicked out of the Middle East, or of what became Palestine, before the exodus of the Jews and during the time in which the Aramaeans came in to inhabit that land, why do you think it is that they found themselves, that even the admitted historical record says the Amorites fled west to their copper mines after being kicked out of the Middle East? Now, how did they know to go and go to that area of what we now know as the United States with Michigan? How did they know that was there? How did they know they could go to that area and get copper and whatever else? Because they had been there before, ladies and gentlemen. They were there. They knew of this country before the deluge. And so when they were expelled from the Middle East, they knew that they could navigate back to that area which they had inhabited before. And when they did, what they found was here and what is here now. And that's when they started coming and finding other indigenous populations that had migrated here and setting themselves up as gods with those people. But I'm so glad to finally know that, yes, because I haven't not been trying to connect this rock wall thing to the Anunnaki stuff at all. That hasn't been a part of my research and hasn't been my goal. But I'm wholeheartedly, no question now, think that there absolutely is a connection, because I was under the impression, as I think many people are out there, that these guys only got here 5,000 years ago. That's not the case. They were here for hundreds of thousands of years, ladies and gentlemen, and upwards of 300,000 years prior. We're talking 250,000 years prior to the deluge. This is why they found coins in wells, in deep fossil record, 220,000-year-old era that had, the same writings as stones found at the rock wall. This is why. That's why the rock wall stones were built to last, but yet when you uncover them, they are weathered as shit. Yeah, they're weathered as shit. I mean, immediately, I loved looking at the official geological reports on the rock wall and seeing the term, the wall is buried under, so many feet of post-diluvial soil. I mean, they openly admit that the wall was covered after, the Great Flood. But that's exactly how we know there's a connection to these people and how we know that that's what they were doing here. When they came back around the second time and found indigenous people here, that's when they started setting up mounds. That's why you have mounds all over the Middle East and these ancient sites. They were here in the Atlantean times, the pre-deluge times. They fled along the 33rd degree from what one of their cities was. Absolutely, it was here. I believe Rockwall was one of them. They fled from that directly on the 33rd degree parallel. Set up Samir. And later on, when they had to flee, because they were coming over here for the longest time, how do you think these guys were able to, the Amorites were able to basically have the entire market cornered in the Middle East on copper in their day? They did. As they had a secret supply somewhere that nobody knew where it was at. And these guys were massive seafaring people. And by the way, Vikings and all that shit and Nordics, I think those are the same thing as these Amorites. I don't think there's any difference in that. I think those are all the same. I think those are just terminologies they've used to try and confound and confuse people. But I don't think there's any difference between Vikings, what we think of as Vikings and Nordics and all that. I think those are the same as Amorites. I don't think there's any difference in those. But this whopper comes out today. Unbelievable, and there's no question in my mind. I mean, last night we talked about the statues, Buddha statues in Afghanistan that are located inside, just conveniently, where the world's second largest supply of copper is located. And I said, I bet you $1 right there that the Amorites were there. This was one of their copper strongholds. And because it appears that what have been depicted as Buddhas also are these Amorites. It sounds like a mashup of Indiana Jones plots, but German researchers say a heavy Buddha statue brought to Europe by the Nazis was carved from a meteorite that likely fell 10,000 years ago along the Siberian-Mongolian border. This space Buddha, also known as an Iron Man to researchers, is of unknown age, though the best estimates date the statue to sometime between the 8th and 10th centuries. The carving depicts a man, probably a Buddhist god, perched with his legs tucked in and holding something in his left hand. Notice how they say it's probably a Buddhist god? That's an admission they don't fucking know. And let me tell you something. This guy does not look like a fucking Buddha. This is a statue of a full-blown Aryan, which I believe these Amorites to be as well. I believe these Amorites are the Aryans as well. This, no doubt, is not a Buddha. And if they want to call this a Buddha, then that means that all of the depictions of Buddhas actually spawned and came from this original pattern. He's got the swastika, not the side turn one like the Nazis used, but he's got the swastika. He's got the beard with the European features and the helmet. I mean, this is exactly the type that were described by South Americans in Peru, all over the place. This guy doesn't look Asian at all. And he's got the beard. This guy is this is an Amorite. No question about it. One can speculate whether the swastika on the statue was a potential motivation to displace the Iron Man meteorite artifact. They took the time to carve this thing out of a meteorite. Now, again, I told you, man, these guys, they were in to metals. and rocks and stones and crystals. They were into it. Why? Because those were materials. They were building materials. These guys were the original builders. They were the original masons. Why do you think they found a tiled floor, a Masonic tiled floor in Oklahoma that's 200-something thousand years old, folks? Okay? This is the big fucking secret that I am blowing the lid off that they have kept tied up for very long. Before ancient Sumer, this world was ruled over by giant ancient Freemasons who attempted to rebuild with their knowledge and their information that they had prior to the deluge to rebuild the world and set themselves up as gods and rebuild the world for mankind and for themselves. These guys were into metals. They were into crystals. That's how we know these guys were the builders of the rock wall. They had a keen eye for building. I mean, every time some structural engineer looks at the rock wall, they're blown away. It's a load-bearing wall. It's built to withstand a huge load. Something, I don't know, it's 20 miles in diameter. Okay, well, if you had a craft that was 20 miles in diameter, you could set it down on top of this fucking thing. And let's say you were marooned here, a giant mothership, 20 miles in diameter, gets marooned here. They need something to kick off the anti-grav system. You build a 20-mile diameter wall, and you build it with rare earth metals, mixtures of various geopolymer crystals, feldspar, granites, zircons, garnet, all kinds of stuff. That then creates, because of its magnetic signature, probably because it came from an ancient meteorite, has a 40 Gauss magnetic signature to it. You hit that sucker with a frequency, a low-frequency wave, low-frequency oscillation, probably through the voice, just as the Bible says in the beginning, there was the word, the spoken word, and that's all you need to make something vibrate. And then, boom, you have enough energy created from the vibration of this thing to kick off an anti-grav system on a 20-mile mothership. I mean, again, I'm just speculating here, but these guys had knowledge, and they didn't just do this stuff on accident. Now, this is an unbelievable find, and there's no question in my mind. Of course, this is why the Nazis wanted this. I've never seen anything like this. This is an absolute... I mean, this is hard proof, no question, folks, that what we're told about, the Aryans and the Olympians and all this stuff, and the Buddhas, and I mean, that's who these guys were. If you watch the movie 10,000 BC, they depict these guys in 10,000 BC. And yeah, they're picking up slaves, and they take them eventually to this place where they're doing this huge building construction. Turns out that huge building construction is the pyramids. And this girl, or these two people are talking, and they say, who are these guys? Who are they? And some say they came from the stars. Others say they came from a distant land when their city fell into the sea. And then you find out this guy who set himself up as master god inside of the pyramid is this fucking Caucasian white cracker guy with these long-ass fingers. He's the main god. I mean, my fucking Christ, dude, they're rubbing it in our faces. But if you don't know any of that, you watch that movie, it doesn't even click in your mind. You're just like, what? Oh, whatever, okay, it's just a damn movie. No, it's not just a movie. Roland Emmerich is an absolute Freemason. Watch any of his movies. My goodness. So yes, these guys, these Anunnaki guys, we've been confused And we've been led to believe that when we look at ancient history and we look at all these different societies and civilizations and people all over the place, we've been led to think that we're talking about different types of people. Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, Amorites, Hindus, whatever, Sumerians, Babylonians, Hittites, Canaanites, Phoenicians, Aramaeans, Jews. Folks, it's all the same shit. This is a part of, remember that what we talked about the other day of them confusing the tongue and spreading the people out throughout the world? This is a part of that. They wouldn't have been able to assume the control they were looking for by making themselves the same person in every place on the globe. They made it regional. That's why Quetzalcoatl and Awanis and Viracocha and Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad and all of these are all the same things. That's why Ningishzida from the Sumerian text is also Thoth. That's why Thoth is also Ra. And he's also Quetzalcoatl. This is why. It talks about this in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, about placing your Ka in the center of the triangle. What he's talking about is the main secret of the Freemasons, transcending the death of the physical body. Being able to take your spirit and your essence out, and through the Merkaba meditation technique, place the Ka into the seat of the triangle. This comes from a meditation technique that allows you to be able to actually put your physical soul, we're talking about major DMT secretions here, folks. Put your soul in a vessel and put it in a state where it is protected so that then you can incarnate in another body, in a different body, and essentially keep the essence of who you were before. This is why Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice born, Enoch, Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus, all three the same guy. Thrice greatest, thrice born. This is why. This is what all of these gods and deities and everything are. They are essentially ascended masters, people who have mastered the arts of the occult, the occult sciences. They have mastered the Kabbalistic information and knowledge. These are advanced people who have advanced knowledge and information that is in these ancient texts, folks. This is what I've been on to for the past couple of decades. And they've been able to transcend the death of the physical body and put their essence in another body and continue on with the goals and aims that they're trying to do. And this is what all of the worldwide religious figures and deities and everything we know of has spawned from. And to think how many wars have been launched over religions that are nothing more but a recycling of the same thing. This is what the Freemasons know and have known for years. This is why these guys crave after this information and why you see these guys at the highest levels always be Masons. Once they learn that it's possible for what is known as this person who you are now to die, but then transcend that death of the physical body, the transmigration of souls, transmigration of souls, rather, and transmigrate into another being or entity, but still able to keep the essence of you. Now, normally when you die and your energy goes back into the non-material planes of reality, this is all covered in the things like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I highly suggest you refer to that. It talks about, not being scared and paying attention to these things after death that they try to, basically demons and things like this that come up. And if you don't know about it, if you're not trained in it while you're living, then when you die, your soul goes into this, into the spirit world, and all of these scary things and crazy things try to basically scare you into coming back down. It works most of the time, according to 5,000-year-old Chinese texts. That's why people keep reincarnating in this plane of misery, is because we are not taught how to transcend and go past that and not reincarnate and ascend up to another level. And they count on us never learning that, so that they constantly have new souls and new people reincarnating back here in their control system. See, if we all knew that you could transcend this physical body and you could keep the essence of who you are and go on into another realm of existence and basically that's what immortality really is based on. That's what these Anunnaki knew. That's what all these, that's why Oannes and Enki and Viracocha and Quetzalcoatl and all these things are the same. They knew how to perpetuate it. That's how these gods were able to rule over for 238,000 years. It wasn't that they were able to live that long because of the orbit of the planet they came from. That's wrong. No, it was because they had this ancient knowledge that allows you to protect your soul in a vessel while you transmute it and transmigrate, rather, keep saying transmute instead of transmigrate, into another physical plane entity. That's how these guys have stayed in power, ladies and gentlemen. There's no telling what leaders today are alive were famous leaders that we have heard of in the past. These guys know how to transmigrate and just come over back and forth. And something tells me the bloodline thing has something does something to facilitate that, make it easier, but still. This whole thing's perpetuating. That's why the Mason thing is such, that's why they say, oh, well, the biggest secret is we have no secrets. Oh, yeah. The Tibetan Book of the Dead talks explicitly about reading these pages after the person is deceased. You're supposed to have somebody read these pages every day beside your body until, so many days go by after you've read every one of them. And what this does is, as you're reading it to the person, supposedly their spirit that's in limbo in the spirit world can hear this, and they'll learn from it and know it. And you can do this, well, if you learn it in life, then you're okay. But if somebody dies and you know that they didn't know this information, you could take it and read it to them, follow the instructions in the book, and read it to them, and direct that person on what to do so that they don't come back and inhabit down here in a fragile human body back in this plane of misery. These guys, by controlling this information, ladies and gentlemen, this ancient knowledge, by keeping it from us, it is spiritual bondage. They have ensured that most of us will never get a way out of here. We're just going to keep recycling. I mean, don't you feel you've done all this before? I felt that way my entire life. My entire life I felt like, God, I've got to do this again. All sorts of ancient cultures and teachings have the same thing. That's what, the Dharma wheel's about, and the Zodiac and all this stuff is based on that. And eventually, after you've gone around all the signs, and you've inhabited all the signs, if you've learned all the lessons that you've learned, you can then ascend up to a higher level. But by keeping this knowledge restricted from us, they are keeping us just constantly recycling ourselves down here, this plane of misery. And it's been going on for so long that it has now, in 2012, produced a world full of miserable people. That's why we're so miserable, because we're all just flat tired of recycling ourselves down here. And, of course, the guys up top, they're loving things. They're loving it because they're going to be back, and they're perpetually running things because they figured out how to incarnate back in new bodies but still keep that essence of who they are. It's just unbelievable. Nibiru. Oh, wait, I had something else I wanted to read first. I had posted this earlier tonight on Facebook, but I wanted to read this. Something I came across. Ties in what we've been talking about. In July 1877, 4 prospectors were looking for gold and silver outcroppings in a desolate hilly area near the head of Spring Valley, not far from Eureka, Nevada. Scanning the rocks, one of the men spotted something peculiar projecting from a high ledge. Now, understand, this is something protruding from the ledge of a rock cliff way up in the air. Climbing up to get a better look, the prospector was surprised to find a human leg bone and kneecap sticking out of solid rock. He called to his companions, and together they dislodged the oddity with picks. Realizing they had a most unusual find, the men brought it into Eureka, where it was placed on display. The stone in which the bones were embedded was a hard, dark red quartzite. Quartzite is crystal. And the bones themselves were almost black with carbonization, indicative of great age. When the surrounding stone was carefully chipped away, the specimen was found to be composed of a leg bone broken off 4 inches above the knee, the kneecap, and joint. The lower leg bones and the complete bones of the foot. Several medical doctors examined the remains and were convinced that anatomically they indeed had once belonged to a human being, and a very modern-looking one. But an intriguing aspect of the bones was their size. From knee to heel, they measured 39 inches. The owner in life had thus stood over 12 feet tall. Compounding the mystery further was the fact that in the rock in which the bones were found was dated geologically to the era of the dinosaurs, the Jurassic period, over 185 million years old. The local papers ran several stories on the marvelous find, and 2 museums sent investigators to see if any more of the skeleton could be located. Unfortunately, nothing else but the leg and foot existed in the rock. So they found the body parts of a 12-foot person encased in dark red quartzite crystal that was over 185 million years old. Riddle me that one, Batman. How did that? So I guess what we were talking about earlier. They found tablets that date 238,000 years of rule on 5 cities on Earth pre-deluge. So I think it's safe to say that we probably have a pretty good idea now of why special forces, the United States Special Forces, invaded the Iraq National Museum. First thing they did during the invasion in 2003, that they sold us 9/11 to do, they went in and got all these tablets. Now, I would say, if that's true about that rock being that old, I would say there's probably other tablets that have been found or not found or confiscated by special forces, who knows, that probably detail even older people and older records of gods existing on this planet for even longer than that. I have the sneaking suspicion that if we're creaming our genes over 288,000 years before the deluge, I have a feeling that that ain't even the fucking tip of the iceberg. That there have been some kind of people here for hundreds of millions of years in some form. And it's as if we, the modern day inhabitants of this earth, are being systematically lied to and kept in the dark about previous peoples. Now, why would that be? Well, because you would be more apt to be able to keep your control system in place. And you'd be more apt to keep your science, which then keeps the mind of people more in the right where they want it. So there you go. All right, let's get into